Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Environment and Planning Committee of Georges River Council. I declare the meeting open at 7 p.m. Acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge the Bidjigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of all lands, waters and sky in the Georges River area. I pay my respect to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who live, work and meet on these lands. Apologies, I don't think there are any apologies tonight. So the next item is request to join by audio visual link. We don't have any requests to join by audio visual link. Notice of live streaming of committee meeting. Staff and public are reminded that this meeting is being recorded for minute-taking purposes and is also being webcast live on Council's website in accordance with Section 5 of Council's Code of Meeting Practice. This recording will be made available on Council's website. Code of Meeting Practice. The order of business is as shown in the agenda, which has been made available. Staff and public are reminded that this meeting is open. Doors to the meeting room are to be left open unless the meeting moves into a closed confidential session, according to Section 14 of the Code of Meeting Practice. Only if the meeting moves into a closed confidential session will the public broadcasting of the meeting be suspended. Council's Code of Meeting Practice prohibits electronic recording of meetings without the express permission of Council. Mobile phones must be turned to silent during the meeting. Disclosure of interest. I do have one disclosure of interest from Councillor Jamieson under item number ENV 03623. Reason being the councillor has an interest in the land and it's a special interest disclosure. Are there any other declarations of interest, please?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, you mentioned ENV 036.
Thank you. Public participation on items on the agenda. There are 7 speakers registered for tonight's meeting, and we'll start with Ms. Catherine Ford, who's speaking in person on ENV 03623 report on submissions, Mortdale Local Master Plan exhibition of 2 options. Go ahead, please, Ms. Ford.
Thank you. Good evening, councillors. Council's own website states the following. We heard that the community loved the current village feel of Mortdale, but would like to see more parking, seating and greenery in and around the centre. We also heard the community's concerns about increased traffic and a preference for low or medium density development as opposed to high-rise like Hurstville and Kogarah. People choose to live in Mortdale because it is not Hurstville or Kogarah. The amenities available in those big centres are easily accessible from Mortdale, and likewise our businesses, shops, cafes and restaurants draw people from the surrounding areas for an experience that is completely different to those large centres. This provides diversity across our suburbs and is why keeping our village character is so important, both to the community and to small businesses, many of which are unique and thrive outside of a large, one-size-fits-all, often soulless shopping precinct. Mortdale is now saturated with R4 zoning, as the slide on the screen shows. The dark red is zoned R4, the yellow is zoned R2, and we don't have any R3, which will give Mortdale the diversity of housing it lacks. We don't need 6-storey development as we already have the highest density in the whole LGA. I support option 2A with the following amendment. 4 stories down Pitt Street and Morts Road, with Cook Street Victoria Avenue and St Catherine Street rezoned R3 for townhouses. This will provide a greater choice of housing and not overload Mortdale with units. The property at 18B Letitia Street, Oatley, is a 4-storey mixed commercial residential development that is obviously viable for the owners. So why wouldn't that work in Mortdale? This folder contains over 400 submissions that were collected on the streets of Mortdale, many with individual comments. The support from the community for no more than 4 stories has been overwhelming. Is council really listening? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Ford. I should have mentioned before, speakers have a 3-minute limit, and the first sound you hear indicates you have 60 seconds remaining. At the second sound, please conclude your comments. The second speaker is Tony Lakakis on ENV 03623, report on submissions, Mortdale Local Master Plan, exhibition of 2 options. Go ahead, please, Mr. Lakakis.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tony Lakakis, and I'm the General Manager of Mortdale RSL Community Club. We note Council's recommendation of option 1A being 4 stories in Macquarie Place and 6 stories on Pitt Street. Our preference is for Macquarie Place to be increased to 6 stories in line with Pitt Street. The current state of the club is deteriorating and very costly to maintain. We need to improve our club to be able to survive. We require a developer to build us a new club, as we don't have the funds to reinvest into the club. We have liaised with our project consultant, who has advised us that any part of the RSL site remaining at 4 stories will not make this project economically viable. This is based on residential construction costs increasing by 30% during the past 2 years. Excavation of the basement car parking will increase the cost further, and we require a new fully fitted club. Our vision is to bring the club into the future and offer our members and community the best facilities. Our proposed new club would focus more on dining, beverage, function facilities, and less emphasis on gaming income. We plan to continue and grow our relationships with our local community organisations, Mortdale Probus, Percival Rotary, Country Women's Association, and local sporting groups. In closing, should our recommendation of increasing from 4 to 6 stories be rejected, the club's future viability will be in jeopardy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lakakis. The next speaker is Ms. Vicky Tsunis on ENV 03623. Again, report on submissions, Mortdale Local Centre Master Plan, exhibition of 2 options. Go ahead, please.
Good evening. As a resident of Georges River Council, I'm disappointed to hear that after holding community workshops and receiving around 1,000 written submissions, largely supporting the 2A proposal, there is a recommendation to Council that the alternate 1A proposal is adopted. Firstly, I'm disappointed that the invitation of the workshops was not extended beyond the study area, given Mortdale serves as residents south of Mortdale train station. My children went to Mortdale Public School. I shop at Mortdale. Our family doctor is there. We have connection to this area, and this proposal does impact us as well. I have no issue with development as the population grows. What I do have issue with is the state government setting development targets for areas to meet future population growth, and council's expected to respond by producing plans to tick that box at the expense of its residents. I'm wondering who the council is working for. It's the residents. The report talks about city spine buildings, shadowing, canopy coverage, cycleways. Sounds thorough, but what about the impacts to services and infrastructure? I have concerns with the pressure on schools, emergency services, sporting facilities, parks, green spaces, transport and traffic. Look at Renown Park. That park is already suffering overuse. Imagine more overuse. The report does not cover the uplift required to facilities and services to accommodate for this growth. Has the council worked hand in hand with the state government to secure funding to go with this development? Our fire station is not full time. Will that change? Mortdale Public School has a small footprint. How can it accommodate more kids and keep its free play space? Trains at Mortdale don't stop all the time. Will that change? Where will additional green space come from if we are in a brownfields area? How will the community space in Mortdale be funded by the state government, or is there reliance on the development funding it? There is a waste management policy, but how will it work with a high concentration of dwellings and people in terms of bin storage and collection, especially with parking being tight? I also have environmental concerns. Too much concrete, making things feel hotter and uncomfortable. Bigger buildings require more energy to cool and heat. At least a 4-storey building, as we currently see in Mortdale, can have trees to provide relief. And potentially we may have a better solar solution. What about weather events that bring flash flooding? Can our stormwater system manage it? Have we got a high risk of flooding? What also makes me feel uneasy is that we have a starting point of 6 stories. It can be pushed higher. We have seen time and time again how developments are approved for prescribed floor limit, and then developers have extensions approved by councils or by the Land and Environment Court on the basis of merit, and bang, another 2 stories go up. So imagine what could happen with 6 stories. So as I said, I am not opposed to the development, but we should take a sustainable approach to make every effort to retain as close as we can the look and feel of Mortdale with proposal 2A. We don't want to see it become an extension of Hurstville and be reactive to managing the fallout from excessive high-rise development. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Souness. The next speaker is James Gennady, speaking on ENVO 03623, report on submissions, Mortdale Local Centre Master Plan exhibition 2 options. Please go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to introduce myself. I've been an expert in ethics, risk, and compliance for over 15 years. I've been an ethics, risk, and compliance professional for over 15 years. The fact that this proposal was, and a decision was made by Vince Belladati and Con Hindi, who went in front of ICAP and were involved in the master plan decision, the RSL proposal.
Excuse me.
If I look at my job experience,
could you just hold on for a moment?
Yep.
Thanks. Yeah, look, I would prefer you don't mention former councillors because it's the current council that's making this decision.
correct, but they were involved in the initial decision for the proposal and the RSL proposal, the master plan. If that's the case, with my background and experience.
Yeah, excuse me, I'll just refer to the director. Thank you.
Yep.
Probably just to clarify that in September last year,
yep,
the master plan that was endorsed by the previous council to be exhibited was resolved not to progress. So I think by bringing up that the resolution or
yep,
master plan that was done by the previous council is not relevant in this case.
Okay.
This council endorsed to go with the 2 options, 1A and 2A, which went to the community, and I think probably the focus should
yep.
be on
No, fair point. I didn't know that. So just saying that, with my background, that's exactly what would have happened. So it would have been revisited and amended or scrapped. So going on from that, in terms of, I've only just really been in Mortdale for 7 or 8 years and Penshurst before that. The area is actually really busy and has a high density already. Most of the area is duplex housing, villa housing, and units and industrial. There aren't actually many houses in the Mortdale area. So I have real grave concerns about adding a height limit of 6 stories. As Vicky mentioned before, that usually gets extended to a far higher amount, with developers being able to influence state government to increase density. Now, the traffic is already horrendous in Mortdale. Universal Street, Boundary Road, trying to turn right from Morts Road into Forest Road. Even the addition of 20 extra cars would have residents stranded for an extra 20 minutes, half an hour, 40 minutes, just waiting to turn right. There's only one way in, one way out. And you've also got the one-way bridge between Oatley and Mortdale, whoever's driven there, add an extra 10 cars on each side and you're stuck there for half an hour. The traffic at the moment can't cope. And to add an enormous amount of people in the centre of this, I suppose the centre of the town, would have an enormous impact and actually bring it to a standstill. So I propose to support 4 stories at a maximum and mixed density housing like terraces and things like that to actually mix up the housing density in Mortel. The other thing is schools are already full. My kids went to Penshurst Marist. They've gone from 120 students to 240. Add all these extra people, where are they going to go? Mortel Public is the same. Penshurst, the frequency of trains comes once every 15 or 20 minutes. It was more frequent in the 80s when I was 10 years old. And now we've got triple or quadruple the population. How's that going to work? And there's this assumption that everyone uses trains. Sydney is not interconnected, and everyone's going to need a car to actually move around and get to the places they want to go. People are not going to spend an hour or 2 hours of their busy time waiting for a train that doesn't turn up. The other thing I just wanted to add quickly is there's a lot of sort of pressure on people who own homes or villas in terms of design and structures and meeting streetscapes. I just hope that that's imposed by the council on the developers so we don't end up with really crappy buildings that actually make the area look really poor. So I propose 4 stories and support that, but 6 stories would just bring the whole suburb to a standstill and destroy what makes it great. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Gennady. The next speaker is Adrian Bunkle on ENV 03623 report on submissions for the local master plan exhibition of 2 options. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me? I'm coming from the point of view of someone that's had a history of RFIs, proposals, business cases. That's my history. I'll declare that now. So my pitch here tonight is not to commentate on all the merits that we've heard so far, all the technical arguments, simply to commentate on the content of the 1A proposal that's documented in the 51 pages attached to the minutes. Now, I think council is a very brainy organisation. Let me get that out of the way for a start. There's intelligent people in this council, I know that. So I'm not in any way questioning that. So I guess that I'm assuming that they know that a lot of the comments in that 1A proposal are simply regurgitated comments from previous original master plan document. They would know that. They would also know that a lot of the comments made simply wouldn't pass the common sense scrutiny test when it comes to looking at a comparison between today's Mortdale and adding 578 dwellings. It just doesn't pass. Some of it doesn't pass the common sense scrutiny test. And my other pitch is the overall observation of 1A is that it tends to try and defend the extreme fringe of all of the alternatives available to us. In any spectrum, as we know, negotiation or otherwise, there's extreme ends. This report tries to defend, I believe, quite strongly, one extreme end of the alternatives available to us. Now, I'll be very quick. I'll try not to regurgitate all what the other speakers have said. There's a couple of examples I'd like to mention of the common sense test. So the community requests and concerns in the past have been that don't resemble Hurstville, please. So what do we get in 1A? A statement such 6 stories is not considered to be high-rise. Well, in whose definition is that? That's what I would like to ask there. Accompanied to that is a very sort of a little rather infantile diagram of a 6-story block next to a 20-story block. And in the middle, in case we didn't get it, there's a 10 and a 14. Well, I think we do know that. This is an example of, I'm sure, an obvious not passing of the common sense test, but nevertheless, it's been put into this 1A proposal. So on the village, one of the key concerns of the community has been, don't destroy the village. So what do we get in 1A? We get a statement that 1A proposal reinforces the idea of a village due to increase in housing supply. Well, anyone knows that if you surround a village like Mortdale, a small area with 6 to 9-story buildings, you obliterate the concept of any village. That is common sense to me. I won't go further into some of the examples that there are around roads. I think that's been covered well. But I do have one outright criticism of the 1A proposal. It uses the term NIMBYs, and I don't think it's becoming of a proposal of this sort of professionalism, just sort of call out name calling of one cohort to another. I don't think that works, and I don't think it should have been done. So I will have that one criticism of them. Okay, so conclusions. In my view, this is simply a regurgitation of the original master plan. How long have I got? Can I ask? Is the first bell gone?
Yeah, 10 seconds.
I nearly did. Okay. I'll end with this. There are two ends of any negotiation spectrum. As is and 2B. As is the existing Mortdale as we know it. 2B is the extreme end of the other spectrum of this negotiation spectrum, which is what 1A proposes. I think anyone with any maths knows that 4 is in the middle. So we're willing, ready and able to talk with the council if we've got the maturity to do so on a basis of meaningful negotiation around the middle ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bunkle. Next speaker is Mr. James Hamilton on ENV 03623, report on submissions, Mortdale local master plan, exhibition of 2 options. Please go ahead.
Thank you, councillors and chairperson, for the opportunity to talk to you this evening. My name is James Hamilton and I'm here to voice my support for the revitalisation of Mortdale through the master plan and option 1A. I've been a resident of Mortdale for almost 25 years and a resident of Oatley for 25 years before that. Over that 50-year period, I've seen good, sustainable residential development that has been accepted by the vast majority of residents. I've seen the development of new parklands, golf courses and community facilities for which residents are thankful. I've also seen the proposal of bad developments, such as Hurstville Council's draft planning scheme, which was placed on public display on the 5th of July 1976, when council proposed to convert Gugger Bay and Dewfish Bay in Oatley into rubbish dumps. It was a classic case of improvement versus preservation, short-term economic gains versus long-term community values. Thankfully, the latter prevailed. I've seen the development of low-rise, medium-density residential in Mortdale over that 50-year period. This type of development did 2 things. Firstly, it provided much-needed accommodation to a growing population, and secondly, it gained the acceptance of local residents, as it was done in a manner that was sympathetic to the existing look and feel of Mortdale, and it added to it. As a local small business owner, I speak to a lot of local people, and I'd say that most people are not anti-development. However, in fact, they are quite accepting of it. However, that development needs to add to the character of the existing streetscape and not detract from it. It also needs to be done in a way that reflects existing infrastructure and not overwhelm it. Growth is certainly not a bad thing, but it needs to be planned in a manner that is palatable and acceptable to residents so that they are not just dragged into the development journey, but they feel part of it and end up championing it. As a certified practicing accountant and having served on the board of local not-for-profit organisation Three Bridges Community for 5 years as treasurer, I only know too well how difficult it is to operate efficiently and effectively in a cash-constrained environment. I can only assume that developing master plans is a time and money consuming activity, so developing them in collaboration with local residents would result in them being developed efficiently and in a manner that gets them right for all parties. That is, both improvement and preservation. For these reasons, I strongly support the vast majority of residents who want to enhance the existing character of Mortdale and want no more than 4 stories. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. The next speaker is David Martin, and again, ENV 03623, report on submissions, Mortdale local master plan, exhibition of 2 options. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for giving me the opportunity to speak. I believe the 2 options presented to the council are an improvement on the original draft master plan. However, option 1A that is recommended for approval should be revised to a maximum of 4 stories in both Pitt Street and the council car park in Cook Street. Mortdale is identified as one of 8 local centres in the Georges River Local Strategic Planning Statement 2040. In addition to Mortdale, other local centres identified include Oatley, Penshurst, Riverwood, Beverly Hills, Kingsgrove, South Hurstville and Ramsgate. Over the next 40 years, the LGA is expected to grow by 84,000 people, so we will need more buildings. Whilst Mortdale Master Plan addresses Mortdale Centre's population, the Mortdale community has received no indication of what its total share will be. But council maps seem to indicate it is far greater than the other centres in the LGA, e.g. Kingsgrove. If Mortdale takes its current share of the 84,000 increase, this would equate to a need for an additional 1,500 dwellings on top of the 570 already proposed. What the community doesn't want to see is an erection of more buildings of the type and scale on Ellen Subway and Railway Parade. The report states that the impact of both master plan options on the transport network are forecast to be acceptable through to 2032. In reality, traffic movements and parking around Morts Road and Cook Street are already at saturation point. Adding an additional 570 new dwellings and additional commercial floor space will cause traffic and parking mayhem. For the community that live in and near Mortdale, it is quite obvious that a new enlarged car park is required. Further, neither option has a contingency plan for car parking if and when the Cook Street car park is redeveloped. The loss of this car park for say 18 months to 2 years during any redevelopment of this site would have a catastrophic impact on CBD business. It's pleasing to see that there is an intention to revise the existing parking strategy for those who need to drive. It's blindingly obvious to everyone, older people who live here who do need to drive to shop, younger people with children, communities coming to Mortdale who do need to drive, and workers coming from afar who do need to drive, that we need a new and large car park, not another high-rise unit block on the site of the current car park. As I mentioned previously, the Cook Street car park should only be a maximum of 4 stories and in the future should be redeveloped in stages to keep vital parking spaces available for shoppers. The car park should also incorporate a newly aesthetically designed marketplace and communal town square to help preserve the village atmosphere in Mortdale. Any future shop-top housing in both Morts Road and Pitt Street should encourage a greater mix of 1- and 3-bedroom apartments to cater for both single working couples as well as families.
Excuse me, Mr. Martin,
Yes.
you've gone over time. Could you wind up, please?
Yeah, I want it. Council should listen to the people, respond positively to what the community has been asking for, and incorporate changes to the recommended option 1A as I've indicated. Thank you.
Thanks very much. That concludes the speakers. The next item is confirmation of minutes of previous meeting. I call for a motion to adopt the minutes of the previous meeting, that minutes of the Environment and Planning Committee meeting held on Monday, 11th of September 2023 be confirmed.
Move, Mr. Chair.
Moved by Councillor Katras, seconded by Councillor Borg. Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Anyone against? Declare that carried. Thank you. Okay, the next item is committee report, E&V 03623, report on submissions, Mortdale Local Centre Master Plan, exhibition of 2 options.
I'll move that, Mr. Chair.
Moved by Councillor. Okay, moved by Councillor Katras. Can I get a seconder?
I'm happy to second that, Mr. Chair.
Seconded by Mayor Elmere. Thank you. Before we ask councillors to speak for or against, I'll ask the director to provide an overview, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. As mentioned, in September 2022, the council resolved not to proceed with the 2021 draft master plan. At that meeting, the council resolved to exhibit 2 master plans. One is 1A, which was the 4 to 6 stories along within the centre with a range of FSRs to rezone land in the vicinity of Newman Cook Street from R2 to a low-scale residential to R3 and R4, to rezone the council site there in Cook Street to a business zone. That option would create an additional 578 dwellings. Option 2A was to maintain a height of 4 stories within the centre, or propose a height of 4 stories in the centre. The council land would be rezoned to a business zone. The development within the Moreton Pitt Street would have a 2-story wall height, and that option would increase 207, would create opportunities for 270 additional dwellings. The exhibition of those 2 master plans occurred from early May to early July. During the exhibition process, we held 2 in-person workshops, and we had 1 online workshop as well. 5,000 letters were sent to the residents of the area. Also placed on exhibition was a traffic study that was done for both 1A and 2A, and a public domain plan for both options. From the submissions that were received, there was just under 400 in support of 1A, just over 500 in response to 2A. The majority of those submissions were form letters. There were also another 38 letters that came in that provided outlined a range of issues of support or non-stating. The key issues that were raised in the responses were similar to what we've heard this evening: traffic, parking, overdevelopment, concerns over the closure of Morts Road, the capacity of the infrastructure, impact of increasing population, loss of the village character, the height, plus also there was issues raised around the need for housing choice, the need for housing diversity, the need for opportunity to have the centre revitalised. At the councillor, we held 2 councillor workshops, one in August and one in September, that went through the issues that were raised by the community in some detail, and we worked through some options and variations of how to address those issues. At the second workshop that was held in September, the staff, or the councillors gave the staff that the option that was most supported was 1A, with a number of amendments. The report that's being prepared this evening and the recommendations are based on those 2 workshops. What the report also does is recommends that if the council endorses a master plan, that we then proceed to put that master plan or the vision for the centre, we start to proceed with the development of the planning framework. So that's the planning proposal that will do the rezoning and the heights and the floor space ratios. The planning proposal will also be supported by a development control plan that looks at the detail of how the centre would function, look and feel. It would also have a contributions plan that went with it that identified the infrastructure requirements to meet any population growth. Mr. Chair, would you like Kathy and Ms. McMahon and I to respond to some of the issues that were raised?
Yes, please.
Okay. The first matter, I'll just stay quite high level. I guess the first issue is in relation to the height in the FSR, and in particular the ability, I guess, to increase the FSR higher than 1.5:1 to maintain within the 4-storey height limit, and reference was made to 18B Letitia Street in Oakley. The comment was made that the development would be viable. I'll probably just say that it's difficult for anyone to know whether development would be viable, so I'll just make that statement. Under the controls that relate to that site, a 2.5:1 and a 12-metre height limit, so that's a 3 to 4-storey height limit. The DA was approved by the former Cobra Council in 2013, and there's been some minor amendments to that development. I think it is interesting to know that the development only achieved an FSR of 0.9:1, and it is 3 stories with some room in the attic, so it isn't a 4-storey development. So I just wanted to make that clear, and on the basis that the report has tried to indicate that we did explore increasing the density and maintaining the height, but the modelling that we have done several times is that the 2:1 FSR under a 4-storey height limit create quite bulky buildings, and buildings that don't allow for articulation. It may not allow for balconies, it may not allow for cross ventilation. They're boxy designs, and we have looked at that several times. The issue around traffic has been raised. 3 traffic studies have been done, one in relation to the 2021 master plan, and one was done, but studies was done both to the 1A and 2A options. Now, the reports, the technical reports were done, indicate that the current road network can satisfy the growth that would occur in the master plan. However, I understand, as do the councillors understand, that the issues that have been faced by the community today relate to traffic, relates to bottlenecks, it relates to the capacity of the road network. And I think you'll find there is an amendment that Councillor Jamieson will speak to that will talk about that issue. The other issues that were raised were things like building design, village feel, environmental outcomes, really very important things that should be addressed in any design and any development activity. It would be the aim of the development control plan to start to bring those things out and to define building design, materials, articulation, village feel, the size of shops, where access points are, car parking that would support each development. That's the role of that development control plan, which is there's a resolution to proceed with that. The issue around infrastructure is also key. Of course, infrastructure not only for how the local centre works, but it's also in the broader context that has been raised this evening about schools and transport. If the council proceeds with the resolution to move to a planning framework, it is at that time where we do that detailed consultation with all those state government agencies. They don't look at master plans because master plan is just the vision. What they do, we go then into discussions on capacity of the road network, capacity of the transport network, the capacity of the schools as well. The last point I'll raise is the comment that Adrian Bunkle made is about the term NIMBY. I'd like to indicate to Mr. Bunkle that term is a quote that's been taken from the submissions that were written by the community and by the residents of your community and the community members. It was not a term that was phrased by my staff. We don't use that term. It is a quote that comes from your community. Did you want Oh, okay. All right. Ms. McMahon has just corrected me in relation to the Letitia Street development. I was incorrect. It's 1.9 is to 1, not 0.9 is to 1.
Thank you, Ms. Bishop. Councillors.
Sorry, are we jumping in? But when do we make the amendment? Now or?
Yeah, just a moment. Are there any questions before we open the debate?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have a question. Catherine. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the Director, Ms. Bishop. Just as a point of clarification, if you wouldn't mind, regarding the existing controls that apply in Morts Road, etc. My understanding is that they fairly much provide for 4 stories as they are and have been in place for quite some time and therefore have never been taken up. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so if we were to proceed with 4 stories, we may see no change.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions from the councillors?
Through the chair, the director. So far, basically we've had a proposal in 2021, went on exhibition, and then we've had numerous involvement from the council staff, consultants, etc. Is there any way you can give me an idea or give the people an idea and the councillors an idea of what this process has cost so far? With all the delays and putting it off, a rough approximation, would it be 100,000, 10,000?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, it's probably cost the council was about 200,000 for the exhibited master plan, and this one was in the vicinity of 150,000, the amendment.
All up, it's cost us 350,000.
Close to. I don't have the exact figure, but
Yeah,
they're,
right.
yeah.
Thanks, Ms. McMahon. Are there any other questions from the councillors, please? Councillor Jamieson.
Yes, so now if I was hoping to have the amendment so we could sort of explain it, but the proposal is basically 2A with the amendments of what is it, R3, so terraces in all that area.
Yeah, okay, so are there any other questions? Yeah, okay, are there any further questions before we ask the mover to speak from the councillors? Anybody else?
Now I'll move the amendment. Yes, can I move? Oh, sorry. Can we move the amendment? Is it on the screen? Yes.
Yeah, can I get a seconder, please?
I'll second it.
Thank you. So moved by Councillor Jamieson, seconded by Councillor Amby Haberha. Please go ahead, Councillor Jamieson.
Do I need to read the whole thing?
Up on the
Chair, I can't read it from here, even with my glasses on.
Yeah, maybe you should read it, Councillor Jamieson.
Okay, so I'm just reading this version, so hopefully it's the correct one. That council note the submissions received in the public exhibition of the two draft Mortdale Local Centre Master Plan options. B, that council adopt the Mortdale Local Centre Master Plan option 2A as exhibited with the following amendments in response to submissions received to maintain the village character, ensure a low building scale in the centre and increase housing diversity. Rezoning of the street block bound by Newman Street, Cook Street, Victoria Avenue and Cook Lane from R2 low density residential to R3 medium density residential with a height of 9 metres or 2.5 stories, floor space ratio of 0.7:1 with associated public domain improvements. Provide additional clarification on dedicated cycleways. State the proposed Martin Place road closure can be trialled with a temporary closure to test traffic impacts and used before any permanent changes are implemented. That council prepare a planning proposal, amendments to the Georges River Development Control Plan 2021 and amendment to the Georges River Local Infrastructure Contributions Plan 2021 to implement the Mortdale Local Centre Revised Master Plan Option 2A post-exhibition version subject to a successful budget bid in the 2024-25 financial year. D, the council write to the New South Wales Department of Planning and Environment requesting the adopted Mortdale Local Centre Revised Master Plan Option 2A post-exhibition version to be endorsed as strategic study. E, that all persons who made a submission be advised of council's decision on this matter. F, that the general manager hold a workshop with the councillors to identify the key parking, traffic and road networks issues that would be considered in a future traffic study of the Mortdale Centre and the surrounding network. And G, that council endorse including design excellence principles and controls in the DCP for the Mortdale Centre to ensure building design complements the village atmosphere.
Thank you, Councillor Jamieson. Would the seconder like to speak on that, please?
Maybe let Councillor Jamieson speak first and then I can speak after. Is that all right?
Yeah, sure.
And before I speak, sorry, we're stuffing it up for you, but the question I was going to ask is, now with the change to the 2A option, how many extra homes and so what would the total number of new homes be? 24.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just had to do longhand. Just over 400 would be the additional homes that would be created.
Could you please, through the chair, could you please clarify that? We have 278 or 200 and thereabouts.
Okay, so the 2A option gives an additional 270 dwellings in the area that is proposed to be rezoned
So
from
we've got
R to
200,
R3
but the extra over
is
basically.
is 133.
So from 270, we go another 130.
That's
Thank you.
correct.
Ask if Christine is finished and then you can get this.
Any more questions, Councillor Jamieson?
So with this question, and I think it's sort of a bit self-explanatory, so how are we dealing with the questions that were raised with traffic and Mortdale Village? I suppose better if you could further clarify that with the traffic.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor Jamieson. The issues that has been raised this evening, as we have heard continuously in the submissions, I understand that F, which is the recommendation that says the general manager will hold a workshop with the councillors to identify the key issues relating to parking, traffic and the road network issues. So the Mr. Latter and myself fully understand the actual issues going on, not so much the technical issues that we've had by the traffic study, because that's done on assumptions and modelling, will then help us frame a brief to do a traffic study for the Mortdale Centre and the surrounding areas based on that funding is allocated to do that work.
And another question through you. One of the issues is the Ellen Subway development, and that represents a lot of the Mortdale people, Hurstville, Kogarah and the design ally. If we have that sort of design, it's just not really tolerable to any of the Mortdale people. So could you please?
I'll explain that. I'll provide some context to you as well. The developments that were on the southern side of the railway line, they had a LEP, they had a floor space and a height, and they would have had design guidance done by the state apartment guide. Those sites weren't subject to a site-specific development control plan that would have helped actually do site-specific controls for how those developments would work on the site. So the intention would be, as I say, if the resolution is endorsed, that we develop the planning framework, which is not only the planning proposal, but a development control plan that would look at quite carefully of the character of the centre, design of the buildings, articulation, roof forms, the setbacks, how, you know, we're talking about a 2-story wall height and then the other 2 stories or 3 stories setback. It provides guidance in those aspects. It also provides what type of car parking, the car parking that would need to be provided on the site, where the access points were. It even can go down to the point of the shop frontages to ensure that village feel, which you often get. That you have smaller shop fronts to create greater diversity of shops. That can be all done within a development control plan.
Another question which was brought up with the slide that was produced by one of the speakers, Catherine Ford, that shows what it seems to be an extreme amount of land that's dedicated to units. Is that, would it be fair to say that it would be good to sort of focus more on the terraces and townhouses and the family home?
Yes, the other thing the development control plan is the zone guides the typology. So the R3 and the R4 allow for a range of dwelling styles, residential flat buildings, terraces, villas. So, you know, and that can be 2-story and 3-story. But I think in relation to variation and diversity, we can also, in the development control plan, talk about dwelling mix. So that's the number of 2 and 3 bedrooms that can be done to accommodate families.
Some more questions. Now we had in the report, it states about a government announcement with 15% extra. If you have 15% affordability, they can have 30% extra height. If you could please expand on that a bit, please.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the recent changes to the state government policy regarding affordable housing for development over $70 million. It would need to go to the state government, but it has a bonus of 30% on the FSR and 30% on the HIDE if affordable housing is provided. But that change to the policy also permits development under $70 million, development that council can, through delegation and through the local planning panel, that bonus applies to any residential flat building in a mixed-use development or in a standalone residential flat building. So someone today or tomorrow could lodge in an application for affordable housing and seek the bonus of 30% increase in FSR and 30% increase over the height.
So I just checked. Ms. Lam, did you want to add any more to that?
Thanks, Councillor Jamieson. Councillor Amber Haber has seconded. Do you have any further questions?
No further questions, just some comments. Did you want to speak first, Councillor Chair? All right. First of all, thank you to all who've come tonight. We've all spoken on this particularly important issue that's been pretty strung out quite for a long period of time. I've written some notes, obviously, in support of this amendment, and just wanted to highlight a couple of things. So when I ran as a candidate for Oakley recently at the state election, we door knocked nearly 13,000 homes. When I said myself and a few of the volunteers that helped me on the campaign, we met many residents who are very much supportive of the no more than 4. I can count, and I actually recall the faces of the 3 people that didn't support it, that they did not support no more than 4. I think the issue that I have here particularly is, I mean, that was my experience, but if we're looking at what was provided through this consultation process, there are some issues. The initial recommendation does not reflect what was actually articulated as a result of the outcomes of the consultation process. The majority of the submissions provided clearly indicated a support of no more than 4, so option 2A. I think it would be rather ridiculous to be supporting a recommendation that does not reflect a process that we spent a lot of money on, which, according to your question, Councillor Catchers, that you've identified quite a lot of money that we've spent on. I think there are. It's a bit of a no-brainer that we do have a housing supply issue. And I know some of my colleagues would also like to quote the Honourable Premier Chris Minns on his recent comments on this issue, and I concur with it. But Premier Chris Minns is not the Premier of Mortdale, it's the Premier of New South Wales, and I think it's fair to say, and I heard tonight, that there's a lot of people who understand how LGA has done quite a substantial amount of heavy lifting for our community, and Mortdale is not going to save the housing supply. That being said, it's very clear that there are other parts of our LGA that are more appropriate and strategically more appropriate for housing supply, but Mortdale is definitely not that area. I think the amendment actually reflects, like I said, the extensive outcome that submission and consultation overall. The second point I probably would like to address is that I did attend one of the workshops, and I think Councillor Jamieson attended all of them. The one that I attended, one thing that I really like about this particular amendment, it actually reflects the diversity of housing that was requested and reflected through that process. And so having 3-bedroom homes was articulated, we're talking about families. And I think that's really important. If we're doing proper consultation and we wanted to make sure that we support a recommendation that truly reflects what the community wants, the aspect of this particular recommendation addresses that diversity of housing. And I think the final point that I'd like to address is also that was raised by some of the speakers today about the traffic and parking situation in Mortdale. I did ask the councillors to actually do their weekly shopping. Whether they did it or not, that's a separate issue altogether. And we all know the experience of doing happy laps down Mort Road and going down Pitt Street and scratching our head and then heading off somewhere else to do the shopping. And I can see some people nodding their heads and chuckling in the back. It's the reality of it all, and that's right now. That's what's happening right now. I think you know, the recommendation clearly articulates addressing that issue as well. I think it's really important. I do respect the director's comments around the traffic studies, but the reality is we know that we've seen, I'm pretty sure most of you who's here tonight have seen near misses at that pedestrian crossing outside IGA, and you kind of hold your head hoping that the person doesn't get knocked over. So it is a problem. Parking's a problem. Now, I know Councillor Smurley has also addressed issues around businesses that have been impacted, and I presume it's a byproduct of lack of parking. I can see, you know, someone here in the audience who also addressed those parking issues as well with me privately. You know, businesses are losing out, and that's right now. And I think, you know, I really, commend the amendment that's been put forward for this recommendation. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ampe. Over. Any speakers for the amendment?
Can I speak?
Councillor Jamieson.
Thank you, Councillor Marnie. And thank you to the community for coming out to talk. I know that most of you have never spoken and you've probably had wobbly feet, and it can be daunting, so thank you. The last few days have been extremely challenging. This is a topic I feel particularly passionate about, and I know the community does too. The responsibility I have in representing both generally and here tonight is one I take very seriously, and I support the following amendment. As an elected representative of my community who was voted in because of my stance on this very issue, I am here tonight putting forward the request of the community. Thank you to both team members and to the council staff who've probably pulled out their hair and been very supportive and worked with me to get us to this point. Our Mortdale Centre Master Plan will provide the certainty the community wants and needs. The Mortdale Village community has already seen the results of overdevelopment. We've seen it unfold in both Hurstville and Kogarah. We've seen it with the local Ellen Subway and Railway Parade developments. The community did not want it to spread to the other side of Mortdale. What they want is more sustainable, considered and reasonable development. I was in attendance at the Save Mortdale Village seminar where I spoke to town planners who pointed out the unique and vibrant features of Mortdale Village, despite it not being on a main road. In fact, it is surrounded by a single-lane bridge and a two-lane underpass. These traffic flow restrictions, similar to an island, are unusual for a shopping centre. We currently have single-lane one-way streets at the top of Morts Road, Macquarie Street and Pitt Street. The removal of car spaces has already caused an issue with businesses, and we are gridlocked during school start times, finish times, lunch times and Saturday mornings. The urban town planner whom we met at the shopping centre said that we look like we were already at capacity. I ask you, what would the impact be on this area if we overdeveloped this island? What kind of gridlock would we create by lumping high-rise towers in this space? Time and time again, the local community has come to me saying they haven't been heard. I'm urging you tonight to listen to their concerns, to listen to their ideas and to listen to their feedback. The community is not against development, but they do not want overdevelopment. I'm here to pass on their feedback, and I'm relying on the support and reasoning of my colleagues to ensure that their feedback is taken into careful consideration. It is up to our local representatives and council to take the case up to the state government and define what is reasonable development for our area. While I believe that we should act collaboratively with the state government, it is important that we reflect the issues and concerns held by our community to the state government. The community acknowledges the need for an uplift, for an increase in affordable housing and a revitalisation of the Mortdale Shopping Centre. We support a considered, planned and reasonable approach to all of these factors, which is why we are calling for our amended master plan. A revised master plan would ensure the required infrastructure is factored into all development. It would provide consistency across the local government area and establish a well thought out, overarching plan, not an ad hoc approach that only suits the needs of individual property owners. We believe the state government will be making legislative changes to allow increased height and floor space for individual properties that provide 15% affordable housing on their development. With option 1A, the 6 stories along Peak Street can now become 8 stories. I support affordable housing across the whole government as council resolved some time ago. However, I am very concerned that 6 stories could become 8 stories and 4 stories can now become 6 stories. It is now more important than ever to keep a master plan at 4 stories. This is why we are calling for no more than 4. Our reason for limiting development to 4 stories are justified on the following planning grounds. 1. The existing B2 zone with a floor space ratio of 1.5 to 1 can only achieve a maximum two floor height limit. The community's urban planner has confirmed this. By increasing the floor space ratio to 2 to 1 or above, we can realistically uplift an existing centre by an extra 2 floors for shop top housing along Pitt Street and Morts Road, therefore increasing our housing stock and giving another choice of housing types. The additional shop top housing will also assist council in meeting its housing targets for 2036 set by the New South Wales state government. It would also give certainty to the landowners in Mortdale and lead to a greater uptake for redevelopment to help council reach short-term housing targets between 2021 to 2026. The Cook Street, Victoria Avenue, Newman Street, St Catherine Street rezoning from R2 to R3 will provide much requested family housing, i.e. terraces, townhouses that can provide 3 bedrooms with a courtyard. This will also help provide a greater housing choice for Mortdale, the great Australian dream. In summary, council can argue to the Department of Planning and Environment that our amended master plan is the appropriate course of action because A, the council's on course to meet the housing targets set down by the New South Wales state government to reach 14,000 new dwellings by 2036. By expanding the B2 zone, it will allow council to meet its commitments and targets set out in the commercial centre strategy by creating an additional 6,600 square metres of commercial floor space and creating jobs and growth. Finally, it will give certainty to all shop and landowners within the B2 zone, which will enable them to increase their yield in both commercial and residential floor space. We were voted in to represent the wants and needs of our local community. They have told us loudly and repeatedly what they are seeking. It's now up to us to make sure it happens. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Jamieson. Are there any councillors who wish to speak against this amendment?
Thank you.
Thank
you, Mr. Chair. I have heard a lot of information that's been given to us tonight. Considering that some people have actually indicated their qualifications, and I think I commend them for those qualifications, but I'd also like to say that, yes, I have a few qualifications too. 40 years as a registered architect, and I've got a Masters of Urban and Regional Planning. I never used this in the past. 30 years I've been on council. I've never quoted this because I believe my job as a councillor, listening to the staff and listening and looking at the reports. But having got a master's degree in 1998, I'm well versed in these type of applications and these types of proposals. Now, I have heard some misinformation, and I suggest that prior to actually making subjective commentaries on what the technical details are, you need to read the reports. You need to read the traffic studies. You need to read the public domain studies. It's all there, and it's all properly calculated. Now, if someone can pick a page out of these reports and tell me that it's wrong because they've done their own studies and they've done their own modelling, etc., I will listen. But when someone says traffic generation, X, Y, Z, and all these sort of subjective, make all these subjective comments without referring to these reports, I doubt the validity of the comments that they're making, including comments from people that are councillors. Now, if you have read these reports, I commend you. And if you've been able to sort of, from a technical point of view, and based on your qualifications, you can actually say that this is wrong, then I commend you again.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
I'd just like to highlight that the report does highlight the number of submissions that were written, and a lot of the submissions did point out the concerns around traffic. So I'm hoping that Councillor Catras isn't making an inference that Councillor Jamieson is incorrectly interpreting the report, but I would suggest that Councillor Jamieson's commentary would have been reflecting the submissions from the report.
Thank you, Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Councillor Catras, and I uphold the point of order. I just think possibly you just stick to the amendment.
I believe I am, Mr. Chair. I believe I'm talking about the reports, and I believe I'm talking about the reports in terms of their validity, their technical. And I think what I'm trying to do at this stage is direct the attention of the councillors and others to the reports when they're making comments. That's all, nothing else. Anyway, having said that, I also want, do we have a slide of option 1A at all? You don't? Okay. Well, I think basically I just want to clarify things because there's a lot of discussion about 6 stories. So far, all I've heard is the 6 stories and the 4 stories. The 6 stories in option 1A and the 4 stories in option 2A. Now, I actually feel that we need to clarify a few things. I think we need to clarify what is in option 1A and what is in option 2A. Is it up? Oh. Look, I don't mind if it's going to be difficult. I'll tell you what, the issue here is that option 1A basically talks about or proposes 4 stories all the way up Morts Road, and the only area that's 6 stories is around the road. And that's basically, in very simple terms, that's what it is. Option 2A is basically 4 stories everywhere. Now, you've heard from the director that if we stick to option 2A, which supposedly delivers 270 residential units or whatever, residential dwellings, then it won't happen. It hasn't happened from a long, long time ago. It hasn't happened at all. Now we're talking about a little bit of fiddling around the edges, and that is introduce a 3-story R3 section, which may deliver 130 townhouses. Well, that's doubtful if that'll happen either. So what I'm trying to say to you now,
Councillor Catras, it's up on the screen, yeah.
Sorry? Yeah, well, unfortunately my glasses don't help me at all. Basically, it's what I said, 6 stories around the railway and 4 stories all the way up to the railway section. So if we're going to actually entertain, because it's not going to happen, entertain a a proposal, a planning proposal that is not going to achieve anything whatsoever in terms of urban renewal taking place, in terms of providing affordable housing, in terms of providing more housing, then I think we need to take into consideration when it goes to the Department of Planning, it'll be knocked out as if it's not doing enough. Now, you reference, Councillor Ambi Hapaha referenced the Chris Minns, the Premier. Now, the Premier has basically indicated to everybody, not just the Premier, but the Prime Minister has indicated we have a very, very, very serious situation with regards to the supply of housing. So we can either turn our back on it or we can do something about it. You are here to actually look at the issues that future generations are going to face. And we're not talking about something which is a total overdevelopment. We're talking about 4 stories, which is never going to happen all along Morts Road, and we're talking about 6 stories. Councillor Jamieson's view about it's going to add another 2 stories on the 6 stories. I actually think, another 2 stories on the 4 stories, that won't happen. Because developers don't look at a 4-story option with 2-story, where 50% is taken up on affordable housing. They don't look at that because those units are going to be locked in for 15 years. That's what they're going to, so why would they want to develop something like that where 50% of the proposal is affordable housing? It's not going to happen. Now, if we're going to support something that's not going to happen, let's be quite open about the fact that we're not supporting the increase in supply of housing. We're not supporting the increase. It's basically, let's go back to the, call it the NIMBY syndrome. Now, let's say this
Point
is
of
not,
order, please.
this is
Can we
not,
not use the term NIMBY, please?
sorry?
Can we not use the term NIMBY to people, please?
Oh, sorry, I apologise for the term, because it's been used in every newspaper everywhere, including by the Premier himself. Anyway.
Yeah, point of order, uphill. Thanks, Councillor Jemison. Councillor Catch, if you just stick to the
thank you.
Amendment, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, what we're looking at is that we've come a long way, councillors, a long way. The first proposal was supposed to deliver 969 dwellings.
Point of order, is it possible to confirm, are we timing these and keeping it point to the recommendation?
Yeah, I'll just check with the director.
Yeah, I'm just conscious.
No, excuse me, Councillor Catch. Councillor MBA Part, thank you. I just checked with the director and there's no time limit on committee speeches.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
For clarifying that. The issue that we've got here is that the first one was going to deliver 969. Option 1A is supposedly going to do 578, and option 2A, 270, and the possibility of 130. This is, I feel, the planning proposal is a non-entity. If the planning proposal for 2A is a total non-entity, it won't work, it won't happen. It basically maintains the status quo. Now, having said that, I'd like to read you from the Premier, because I think now you need to get to the crux of the matter. And the crux of the matter is, if you don't come up with something which is sensible, which can be done, your planning powers are going to be taken away. And that includes Mortdale. New South Wales Premier Chris Minns has declared war on NIMBYs. Sorry about that. It's a quote. It's a quote. You want to see it? NIMBYs warning councils he will turn to the nuclear option if that state ambitious housing targets are not met. In an address to a New South Wales Property Council lunch on Wednesday, Minns said his government would move away from demonising developers to praising innovative buildings as a method of expediting housing supply. I won't read it all, just the first few paragraphs. Ask if you would look to the nuclear option. Minns said, I'm reading directly from the article, Minns said he was not going to rule anything out if councils fell short of the 76,000 yearly dwellings required to be constructed under the National Housing Accord. Minns said that the powers, hear this, the powers were already available to the government and did not require legislative changes to planning laws or negotiation with the upper house. We've got the powers inside the New South Wales government to enact reform, to pursue housing targets and completions in the various parts of the state, he said. So what you're doing, in actual fact, by going to the non-planning proposal, is you're actually putting the residents at risk to having the planning powers taken away, and you might end up getting your 8-storey buildings all the way down Morse Road. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Catras. Are there any other councillors that want to speak against this amendment? Councillor Mansfield.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm also going to stand up because I find it easier to speak when I'm standing. Yeah, thanks to the speakers tonight. I appreciate you coming here and providing us with your points of view. I acknowledge that you have concerns about this, but the reality is we have a housing crisis in Australia. You know you've got a housing crisis in Australia when the Daily Telegraph is running commentary every day about this issue. They normally wouldn't even be considering it. You cannot pick up a newspaper, you cannot look online, you cannot hear a news bulletin without hearing about people who are in rental stress, people who are moving back in with their parents because they can't afford to buy their first home. Most people in this room, I'm going to go out on a limb here, most people in this room are not in that situation, but you know what? I am. I'm a renter. I'm a sole parent. I raised 3 kids on my own without child support, so I'm a renter. I'm in a situation that in another couple of weeks' time, my rent's going up $100 a week. I don't even have working lights in my kitchen. I don't really have much of an option because there's nothing out there. There is no accommodation out there. Now, this particular master plan is not going to resolve this capacity problem overnight. We're suddenly not going to see 540 additional dwellings by this time next year. It's going to take very many years to address this problem, and consecutive state and federal governments have a lot to answer for underinvesting in social housing and housing in general, because this is why we're in this crisis. There are people like me, there are people like my children. One of them was fortunate enough to be able to buy something, but not everybody is in that situation. Some people just need a roof over their head and they cannot afford it. The median price for a unit is currently $680 a week. The median price for a house is $720. Well, I'm paying a lot more than that. I'll be paying a lot more than that in a couple of weeks' time. And if I was to choose to move, I'd be paying probably close to $1,000. So someone like me who has lived in the Georges River area, grew up in Blakehurst, moved away for a little while in my 20s, but spent most of my life in this area, raised my family here, I am priced out of this area. And if we don't increase the capacity of housing, people like me move away. Probably a lot of you would be glad to see the back of me after my views are being stressed tonight. I don't really mind. I'm not going to stand here and say that I'm entirely comfortable with having to increase uplift just specifically in Mortdale, but I would challenge you. Go look at Cobra North. Has anybody seen some of the development in Cobra North and the cranes that you can see all throughout the sky? That's been happening back since the days of Cobra. There is other areas, other locations in our LGA which are taking it up. There's also Hurstville has an incredibly dense CBD, which a lot of it is residential. It's not concentrated sort of going further out into the suburb of Hurstville, but it's very highly concentrated in Hurstville. Hurstville has done the heavy lifting. Cobra has certainly done the heavy lifting. Mortdale is not being asked to do hugely heavy lifting here. We're just asking for some uptake so people can put a roof over their head, that perhaps your kids won't have to move to way out west or south or interstate because they cannot afford to live in Sydney anymore, because that's the reality for very many people. Doing nothing is no longer an option. You know, there was an article a couple of days ago which referred to an article from last year about a couple of French architects that said that Sydney is at risk of becoming a ghetto of the rich. Well, you know, gee, that doesn't make me feel great, because someone like me and my other children, where are we going to go? Am I going to live in my car? Probably doesn't matter to any of you, as I said, but this is a reality. I'm one person who's living it. So I'm speaking to you from a different perspective than most people on this council. And everybody needs to do their bit. This housing crisis is real, and it's because we have a lack of housing supply. It's not just up to Mortdale to resolve this, but everybody has to play their part. Our state has to come up with 75,000, 76, 78, depending where you read it, additional dwellings per year to meet the housing targets and demand. People who do rent go to open houses and there are 50 other people there. They're offering more money so that they can put a roof over their head. And I'll tell you something else. I went to visit a friend who lives in Enmore. A few weeks ago, we went for a walk. Enmore Park's beautiful, and at Kellerman Pool, really lovely. There are people who are living in tents in Enmore Park because they cannot find accommodation in Sydney. This is a reality, everybody, and we cannot turn our back on this anymore. What we're doing here by creating these additional dwellings, we're creating capacity for the additional dwellings. It doesn't mean any of them are necessarily going to be taken up. And as I asked the director earlier tonight, the controls that have been in place around Mortdale, in Morts Road in particular, I guess Pitt Street as well, have been in place for a really long time. Nobody's taken them up. The controls that the amendment, which I appreciate that there has been an amendment to increase to an R3 density in that section, which comes out of the original 1A option. But let me tell you, these controls have been in place in Penshurst to convert to R3, and in Narwee, none of that's been taken up. So effectively, if we go with this option tonight, we could be doing nothing. All of the time and effort that we've gone to over the last couple of years trying to resolve this problem and contribute to reducing the housing supply problem will come to naught, because if it's not being taken up so far, why miraculously is somebody going to, as a developer, why are they suddenly going to want to invest in Mortdale to build 4 stories when there's no money to be made in it? You know, we're not talking about affordable housing. We removed that. That was in the last master plan. And this particular 1A option, which is the original option, the recommendation from the council officers, is the best option that we as a council should be moving forward with. We cannot allow people to pull up the drawbridge. We're okay, everybody else can go live in their cars or go live in tents. When are we going to take notice? When people are camping down at Cars Park or Oatley Park? Is that when we're going to take this seriously? We as councillors get reports of people at Cars Park or Sans Souci who are living in their vans. I, for one, am really reluctant to report that to council officers, because where else are they going to go? You know, we have to get real with this. This is not going to resolve overnight. This could take 20 years, if ever. Even if we go with option A, which I don't think we will tonight, I think we'll probably end up with this amendment. But it's not going to help the situation. We were not elected to council just to maintain the status quo and be popular. We're elected to make hard decisions that impact people's lives, not just our generation, but future generations, not just the nurses and teachers who are being and police and emergency service workers who are fleeing New South Wales, as was quoted in another article. There are regular people like me. So, you know, I'll be gone too. As I said, you'll probably be glad to see the back of me, but it's a reality. I am a living, breathing example of someone who can no longer afford to live in this area. And until we address it through things like this, I'd love to come live in Mortdale if there was somewhere I could afford to live in. At this stage, I wouldn't be able to get a place. So, you know, that's my situation, but I'm really passionate about it, and I'm going to leave it there. Please just consider what you're doing tonight, councillors. This is a really serious situation that affects more than just you sitting at the table and these people in the gallery. It affects our whole LGA and your kids and your families and their friends. This is a very real issue. We cannot look the other way any longer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lansbury. Are there any other councillors who wish to speak against the amendment?
I'll keep it very brief, Mr. Chair, but Councillor Catras and Councillor Lansbury, I think, made a very emotional speech on why they believe that option 1A is the best way to go forward. I hold a particular view that I've held for quite some time, and it's knowledge out there in why I believe that 1A is the best way forward. I must say that hearing from the submissions that the director put forward to us, it seems like the community is split 50-50, right, on this, just from the submissions that have come through. And I think what a great achievement to receive over 1,000 submissions from the community on something that they're very passionate about. And I think we've got to commend the community for being involved in this, because ultimately this is what we asked from them. And from the point earlier that the gentleman made, this was a process that was started in the last term of council, and I was on that council. So was Councillor Lansbury, and so was Councillor Catras. The process was started, and council officers led by Director Meryl Bishop, who I must say is very prominent in her field. We should be proud to have a fellow at the Planning Institute with us at our council. We were the only council to have 2 fellows from the Planning Institute here. And Meryl, you and your team do amazing work to try and ensure that we are doing the right thing and we're moving in the right direction. We started this process back in the last term of council, and this has taken a significant step back from what was originally put forward to the community. So ultimately the community has one already. With the two options that have been put forward to us, the community is already ahead with what they want to see. Right now, there is a very minor difference between the two options. And I want you to think very objectively about this, because this is the way I see it. We are proposing 6 stories along the railway corridor and 4 stories everywhere else. The director has indicated to us that we want to try and ensure that we get a diverse housing supply within that area. And I'm sure that the staff will do their utmost best to ensure that there is that diversity of housing, so that we can have villas and townhouses and backyards and those sort of things in Mortdale. But I think what's most important is that we ensure if we are going to have development and we're going to have increased density and heights, then why not have it on the railway corridor? It's the most logical place to have it. I don't see why we need to increase densities anywhere beyond the railway corridor or major highways, because that in itself creates a barrier, right? One be it noise, one be it dust, one be it whatever it may be, but that creates a barrier, a built barrier, right? For I guess the further away that you get, the more family orientated homes that you have. But there's also, it provides that ability for people that have that are constrained, that can't afford to live in the area, to still be close to their parents or their family or whoever it may be, like Councillor Lansbury has mentioned. I'm a big fan of building along that railway corridor. I think that that's important. If we are going to go down this path of having increased development, then yes, have it along the railway corridor, close to train stations. And the points that were made by some speakers tonight are extremely important, and that is the social infrastructure, the schools and the hospitals and all the other things. But that's the stuff that we should be advocating for. All as councillors together, we should be fighting and making sure that our area receives its fair share of funding for those facilities, right? And I want to put my hand together with every single one of the councillors here today, and no matter what option gets through, right, we need to fight for those social infrastructure investments, right? And we need the community to stand up and speak when it comes to state elections and federal elections about having more funding coming this way. Councillors, I'm not going to support the amendment that was put up by Councillor Jamieson, because I think that the council officers have done a remarkable job over the last 4 years. And I think they have sat there and they assessed submissions that have come through from our community, and they have provided a expert opinion on the pathway forward. And the pathway forward is option 1A. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
May I speak for the amendment, please, Mr. Chair?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Bull.
Thank you. I would like to speak in favour of the amendment. I want to address a couple of the pieces of commentary from Councillor Catras. So councillors are elected to take into consideration all of the information that is provided, and the technical information that we received from the staff and the advice we received. That is one part of the information that we must consider, and the submission from the community is another very important piece of information that councillors can and must consider as well, and that's something that I'll be taking into consideration. No one here is denying about the housing crisis. I think Georges River Council has done a lot of the heavy lifting for this LGA in terms of our housing capacity to increase our housing supply. We're on track to meet the housing capacity targets that have been set. The delivery is not there, the supply isn't being taken up, but that is not unique to Mortdale. That is across the LGA, that the supply is not being taken up. So we're looking at Mortdale in isolation, saying it's not being taken up the current capacity, but that's across the LGA. So we need to look at issues broader than just increasing capacity and look at what is going to stimulate the building economy, so that the developers do want to take up the current capacity that is already in the system. If Councillor Lansbury has touched on the development that we're already seeing, it's as a result of the Kogarah New City Plan. So in the last 6 years, we've seen rampant development in Kogarah North, down Princess Highway and Rocky Point Road, around where I live. You'll see that the development is now taking place from the decisions from 6 or so years ago. But there is still current capacity that can be taken up. So when we are just focusing purely on a housing crisis, there is supply that can be taken up that isn't. So I think the community has spoken very loudly in the submissions around their concerns around the traffic and the parking, and they should be listened to. I don't think we're going to solve the housing crisis of New South Wales in the suburb of Mortdale. So I'll be supporting the amendment put forward.
Thanks, Councillor Ball. All right. Thanks for everybody's input. Thanks for the public that came in tonight, the councillors' input as well. And I acknowledge that councillors Konchowski, Mort, Stratokopoulos and Smurley have also come in. They've never been on this committee. I appreciate that. Anyway, look, I'll put this amendment to the vote. Oh, sorry, excuse me. Giving a right of reply to Councillor Jamieson. I'm a bit new at this.
Thank you, because there was just a few issues that were raised that also, we all have kids and we all want our kids close by. So it's not an issue that's unique to Council Lansbury. But another issue that I did speak to the director about is, if this isn't good, like, will we have an opportunity to discuss this with the planning? It does go to a gateway, and if they don't say it's good enough, does that mean we'll come and how do we, I guess, mitigate that risk that Councillor Catcher spoke about?
So if I just rephrase the question back to you, is that if the resolution goes ahead, we develop and there's an endorsement to prepare a planning proposal for 2A, we bring it back to you, we then lodge it into the Department of Planning for a gateway to place it on exhibition. They do have an option, as Councillor Catras has indicated, to ask us to revisit it, to say that it doesn't meet the direction of the state government in relation to housing supply and development of Arundel Railway Line. They could do that, but that's I can't give you a definitive on that at this stage. I don't know, but they could do that, yes.
So with that knowledge, I'm of the opinion that we reflect the people's issues, take the issues and concerns to the state government, and then if we have to do something else, then we do it. I definitely don't think we should be instigating it. Just in regards to the missions, yes, I thought they were 50-50. Well, but I actually ranked the people that I thought were pro 6 stories, and most of them are very pro RSL. But when I asked them what stories and what level they were interested, some people said 2, and I would say less than 20 actually said 6 to 8. So that's just from talking to people. I think sometimes paper and documents is not similar to the traffic. When you're actually with people and talking to people, you get a better feel. And another thing that it was, that's right, I think this issue is bigger than the housing issue is bigger than just Mortdale. But I can tell you during COVID, I know my property was, half the value, and I couldn't rent property. So, and I've got another property in Jersey Avenue, and it was worth nothing. So there's something that we can work with. Obviously, there are circumstances that can change it like that. Not that I'm saying that it is, and we'll, that's something that a state government and not necessarily Mortdale has to sort out.
Thanks, Councillor Jamieson. I'll put this amendment to a vote, please. If we can go around the room, please, Ms. McKinley.
Your vote, please, Mr. Chair.
Sorry.
For the amendment.
Yep. So this vote's for the amendment. I'm voting in favour of it.
Sorry, for. Your vote, please, Mr. Mayor.
Against.
Councillor Borg.
For.
Councillor Ambi-Hay-Pahal.
For.
Councillor Jamieson. Councillor Catras.
Yes.
Councillor Lansbury.
Against.
Councillor Wayne.
For.
5 for, 3 against.
Okay, so we've got 5 votes for, 3 against. I declare the amendment carried. Yeah, excuse me, sorry, the amendment now becomes the motion.
That's correct.
Do we go again? Okay. That's it, is it?
That's right. The amendment becomes the motion as well.
Oh. Thank you. All right, the next item is ENV 03723, proposed LEP and DCP heritage review.
Move that, Mr. Chair.
Moved by councillor Catras. Could I get a
second
seconder, please?
Second that, Mr. Chair.
Seconded by councillor Bork. Before we go ahead with any discussion, I'll ask for Ms. Porter on the staff to give us an overview, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As councillors would be aware, since the commencement of the Georges River Local Environmental Plan 2021, 2 interim heritage orders have been made to correct Schedule 5 environmental heritage to list additional properties as heritage items. While it's not uncommon for new items or places of potential heritage significance to be identified over time, many councils undertake more frequent heritage studies to consider filling in the gaps or routinely reviewing heritage items to maintain the robustness and integrity of listings. To reduce the uncertainty of an ad hoc approach through RHOs, the report recommends that council undertake a heritage study to review the heritage items from the former Kogarah local government area and update the associated heritage inventory sheets that accompany each of those items. A review of the items from the former Hurstville LGA would not be required, as these were recently reviewed and the inventory sheets updated in the Hurstville Heritage Study, which was from 2017 to 2020. The Heritage Study would also identify any potential new items of heritage significance across the whole Georges River LGA and develop the associated heritage inventory sheets for each. The review would be subject to a budget bid next financial year and would inform a future amendment to the LEP, Schedule 5 Environmental Heritage and the Heritage Maps. The report also recommends that council commence a review of heritage controls in the Georges River DCP 2021, which would include reviewing the heritage conservation area maps, which identify properties as either contributory, neutral or intrusive items, and different guidelines apply based on these categorisations. In recent years, some properties which have been subject to a heritage referral or DA have been found to be inaccurately mapped, for example, due to works happening to the property over years that have brought a once neutral item up to a contributory status. And a gap has also been identified in that there is no heritage inventory sheet for each of the HCAs, which is typically prepared to provide more detailed information about its significance. So this review is proposed to be commenced this financial year and would inform a future amendment to the Georges River DCP 2021. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Porter. Councillors, are there any questions about this matter before we open the debate? Okay, would Councillor Councillor Catras has moved. Would you like to?
Through you, the Chair. I don't really need to talk to this one unless others are going to talk to it. If they aren't going to talk to it, then I'll talk to it. If they are going to talk to it, then I'll talk to it.
Thanks, Councillor Catras. Councillor Ball.
I just have a couple of comments. I'd just like to say well done and thank you to the staff for this proactive report. I know it's obviously been identified as a need off the back of the development application on the property at Carlton Crescent in Colga Bay. I know that's a property that the Colga Bay Progress Association has taken a lot of interest in, and we're very supportive of the actions of staff to implement the IHO on that. And so I was really pleased to see this proactive report put forward to see if those issues exist anywhere else in the old Kogarah LGA. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Just one thing, it's more of a typographical error. On page, what is it? Page 59, you're saying diagram appears to be a Bryan Estates Heritage Conservation as per the Cogra South Heritage Conservation Area. So maybe it's only a typograph. I'm not.
Do you, Mr. Chair? It doesn't make any difference to
I
the
know.
report. Yeah, thank
I'm
you.
just saying if it's coming. I'm just saying if it's coming before us again, maybe that could correct it. And I concur with the comments of Councillor Book. I basically think the main issue here is that there has been an increase in the number of unidentified heritage buildings being identified at the time of a development application. And that's a real problem for the people. It's a problem for the community because the community have to put in a whole lot of effort in trying to get an interim heritage order on a property which hasn't been identified as a heritage item. And it's a real problem with a person that's bought the place and wants to develop it and finds that there is a heritage item there. So going through and redoing everything and looking at everything in detail is a benefit to both the resident or residents, the community, and also the. Are we keeping you up, Councillor? If we're keeping you up, I'll probably stop. I accept them. And so I just think that it's an issue that.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, would you mind keeping your comments to the agenda, not other councillors?
I just find it rather rude that someone yawns while somebody else is talking. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers for the motion? Anybody against?
Yes. Can I ask
Councillor
a
Wang.
question? Yeah. So this review of the heritage buildings, is that to review new ones or we're going to review the older ones? So if do we need to say if some buildings are not eligible or applicable, should we move it out?
To the director.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it would involve a review of the existing heritage items from the former Cogra local government area, as well as calling for new items across the whole LGA. There's no need to review the former Hurstville heritage items because that was done recently. The heritage study wrapped up in 2020. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just follow-up question. So so this is just the review of what listing of the heritage items, or do we need to review the whole process? Because I got lots of feedback that the heritage building is actually real burden to the to the business, to the residents. So I'm just wondering, are we aware of this feedback from community? Make their life very hard.
Look, as part of looking at the former Cogra items, we may look at some of those items to see if sometimes they're alterations and additions, or the building no longer has the status that it may once have had for a whole range of reasons. We don't actively delist properties, Councillor Wang. If a person doesn't wish their property to be listed anymore, they need to contact council. They also need to do a study to identify why that property should no longer be listed, and it is quite a process that they go through. So they're listed for a reason. There are all sorts of, if I would suggest that the person you speak to should get in contact with Ms. Porter and our heritage advisor, because there are concessions that are given if you have a heritage item as well. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So if the community or I want to give some feedback to this review process, what's the venue?
Let me just indicate we won't proceed unless we get funding, and we will put a budget as a result of the resolution. You might see it refers to if we are successful in getting a budget bid for 24, 25, you will be advised on the journey that we follow when this occurs. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, is any further discussion or questions from councillors? All right, I'll put it to a vote. Moved by Councillor Catcher, seconded by Councillor Borg. We go around the room, please.
Your vote, please, Mr. Chair.
For.
Mr. Mayor.
For.
Councillor Borg.
For.
Councillor Amby Haperhut.
For.
Councillor Jamison.
For.
Councillor Catras.
For.
Councillor Lansbury.
For.
Councillor Wang.
For.
Thank you. I declare the motion carried. The next item is EMB 03823, GRDCP 2021 Amendment Number 5, Subdivision, Lot Consolidation and Boundary Adjustments in Heritage Conservation Areas, Public Exhibition. Can I get a mover for that one, please? Moved by Councillor Jamieson and a seconder. Councillor Lantry. Before we go to the debate, I'd like to introduce Ms. Long, who's going to speak on this, give us an overview on this matter. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. On the 26th of November 2021, the Housing SEP came into effect in New South Wales. The Housing SEP aims to incentivise housing typologies such as boarding houses, co-living housing and housing for seniors and people with a disability. Schedule 7A of the Housing SEP states that the provisions for seniors housing do not apply to land in the Greater Sydney Heritage Conservation Areas. This clause also states that this section is repealed at the end of the 31st of December 2023. The New South Wales Government placed the moratorium on seniors housing in heritage conservation areas to allow councils time to finalise any necessary policy updates prior to the expiry of the moratorium and ensure that the planning framework, including state and local controls, will deliver appropriate outcomes for seniors housing in heritage conservation areas. The impending lifting of the moratorium on the 31st of December 2023 means that seniors housing provisions of the Housing SEP will start to apply to heritage conservation areas within Greater Sydney, including those in Georges River LGA, from the 1st of January 2024. Accordingly, Council is seeking to amend the provisions relating to subdivision in heritage conservation areas in the Georges River DCP 2021. The proposed amendment is to insert new guideline statements for each heritage conservation area that would apply to any future development in a conservation area, including seniors housing, as currently there is little guidance on subdivision or lot consolidation in the DCP. The purpose of this report is to seek council endorsement to publicly exhibit Amendment Number 5 to the DCP. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Ms. Long. As the mover, Councillor Jamieson, would you like to make any comments, please? And Councillor Lansbury, a seconder. Do you have any points to raise?
Just had a question. My take on this, and I've just remembered, Ms. Bishop, what I wanted to ask you this afternoon, sort of my other question was in relation to this item. My overall impression of this is it's tightening it up so that there'd be more control over it. Yeah, that's the thing. And just to point out, and I don't think it's a big deal, I don't know if this is what Councillor Catras mentioned before, but there was the diagrams, there was 2 O'Brien's estates rather than a Cobra North in there, which no biggie, but just technically correct. But yes, yeah, so my interpretation of it is that it's tightening up controls to make it harder for somebody in those heritage areas to do something like a subdivision, etc.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor Lansbury, for your question. So basically, we don't have a lot of guidance in the DCP at the moment regarding subdivision, lot consolidation, and conservation areas. And seniors housing would require generally lots to be consolidated. And the subdivision pattern is a characteristic of conservation areas and can be, part of the historical subdivision pattern, which makes an area significant in terms of heritage. So it's about protecting the heritage significance of those areas in relation to subdivision patterns, which, seniors housing in those conservation areas could compromise if, multiple lots were consolidated and, the streetscape were to change. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Long. Are there any other questions or discussion from councillors? Councillor Ball?
Just a question on the timing, because obviously you're saying that the moratorium is finishing up in December. As council officers confident that the process this needs to go through, we will have this implemented to provide that protection before that ends?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor Ball, for your question. We're completely aware of the timing. Hence why we are putting this report up to you so we can place it on exhibition as soon as possible. So we're aiming to put on exhibition through November, early December, for a 1-month exhibition. And once a document or DCP, is on exhibition, it has to be a consideration for DA. So we'll make that timeline, and we'll process the submissions and review that and report back to council early next year and get the DCP amendment adopted. So yeah, it will be a consideration for a DA. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lime. Any further questions or discussion from councillors? In that case, I'll put it. We'll go around the room.
Mr Chair, your vote, please.
For.
Mr Mayor.
For.
Councillor Ball.
For.
Councillor Amby Haperhart.
For.
Councillor Jamieson.
For.
Councillor Catras.
For.
Councillor Lansbury.
For.
Councillor Wang.
For.
8 votes for.
Thank you. I declare that motion carried. The next item on the agenda is ENV 03923 Development and Building Department Functions and Services Metrics Report, Q4 2022-2023 and Preliminary Planning Application Metrics for Q1 2023-2024. Could I get a mover and a second on that, please? Thank you. Councillor Catras, thank you. And a seconder, please.
Seconded.
And Councillor Amby Haperhart seconded. Thank you. Before we move to any discussion, I'd like to invite Mr. Frayne to give an overview, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, this is a report of the performance, essentially, of the Development and Building Department that I head up. Essentially, the key things that we deal with are obviously development applications and certificates, so I'll just move through them piece by piece, noting that it is getting late. With respect to Q4 22-23, as those of you will probably know, we had a difficult period in terms of staffing for most of 22-23. At the sort of middle of that quarter, we started to get the staff we needed to do our job. So in that quarter, it was more consistent with 22-23 in that we had 87 applications, development applications and mods and reviews were determined in that period. But in Q1 23-24, as those staff started to hit the ground, there was a rise of 56% in determinations to 136 determined in that next quarter. And that's simply down to us managing to secure additional staff to get the job done. The processing times similarly for Q4 22-23 was probably the worst we've had in a while, at 156 days, as we worked through some quite old applications. But for Q1 23-24, that's down to 131 days, but obviously we would like to see that improve further if we can maintain our staffing levels. Currently, we have outstanding 243 applications of all kinds in terms of development applications, modifications, and reviews, and 48 of those are currently going through the planning portal. I note that the applications, their first point where an app customer comes to us, and I note that number has been a really good achievement by the people in that team. They've brought it down from what was probably about 100 most of the year, and that's not down to lodgements going down. Lodgements have remained relatively steady. That's down to them just getting on top of it and pushing through it. It means our customers are getting a quicker service up front, which is really important for our whole process. The value of applications determined was up in Q1 this year, essentially because a lot more applications went out. I don't believe that's down to high value applications, it's simply that there was more applications going out. In terms of the local planning panel, in these quarters it dealt with, first in Q4 it dealt with 9 applications, it dealt with 15 in the Q1 of this year. So it has been busy. Not as busy as it was in times past, but it has been busy for the last little period. Just as the team captures up, they have to work with them. The Sydney Regional Planning Panel, in contrast, indicating sort of the slow pace of large developments, there has only been one, there was only one determination in both quarters, which was to do with the development site at 9 Gloucester Road, which the panel elected to determine by way of refusal and is now playing out in court after the applicant's decision to appeal. In terms of building information certificates, these have remained steady. These are the mechanism by which works that have not been carried out in the correct order and the correct process get dealt with is the nicest way to put it. And as such, they do take longer for development applications, but we are trying to work through the backlog because we don't want to have them licensed there too long. But we have got a steady flow of those. It's obviously when a privately certified application wanders off course, when an applicant just goes off and builds something, sorry, a person just goes off and builds something, this is where it ends up in the building information certificate area. So they do take some unpicking. Just moving through certification, the rest of the certification area is relatively consistent. There's nothing overly changed there in terms of the general approach. We continue to be sort of on the smaller end of the market share, dealing with applicants who come to us because they know we're here and we do have to take their work, but we don't have a huge volume of those, either CDC wise or council certified wise. The lodgement team continues to steadily get through its work, but again, indicating the general situation in the market, that has not been particularly strong in terms of numbers, but it is consistent with every other, DAs and everything else is going the same way. People aren't doing a lot right now in terms of development. Our current staffing situation is that we now have 2.5 uncovered vacancies compared to previously. A lot of that is filled though by temporary labour, so there's no guarantee that will remain the place. We're trying to keep it in place as long as we can. We're trying to recruit permanently, but a lot of it is temporary labour, so it is a fragile sort of piece at the moment, if you want to put it that way. But we are continuing to look for permanent people, and some of those people, we've had some contractors come and become permanent staff as well, and they've come through that angle recently, which has been good. Now, as part of it, we have, through the Department of Planning, State Government Department of Planning's Planning Delivery Unit, joined into a deed essentially as part of what's called the Metro Assessment Relief Program. The department's identified that councils, because of the staffing issues, have been having trouble getting through some of this backlog of applications, and they've only relatively recently started working with us to try to assist us getting our development application numbers down. I would expect, though, us to start seeing results maybe in Q2 or Q3 of this financial year rather than the time past. But as part of that program, we also have to commit to going through our processes again and looking at opportunities to improve our processes to see if there's any efficiencies to be gained, particularly given that we are sort of in a very much a moving space with the planning portal and technology and everything else. So we have committed to do that, and Meryl's working with myself to try to put in place that review mechanism. But essentially the conclusion is that after probably a pretty challenging 22-23, Q1 is promising. There's some good results there, and if we can continue to work through it with the team, with the staff, and hold on to it in the label we have, I'm confident that we'll probably head in the next year in a really good position. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frone. Councillor Katras has moved. Do you have any?
Just a quick comment. I think it's a marked improvement on what we've had in the past. I think some of the sort of 1.5 extra staff that you're getting, or whatever it is, the figure is with the part-time contractors as well. It may not be entirely reflected in the figures because you're taking an average, and there's still the waiting time is still a bit high. But I think there was also a focus, because I read in paragraph 15, which is very pleasing, and that is that 14 long-standing complex applications that have been before council for more than 300 days have now been resolved. And I think that was a very good achievement. And I think if you can push the department to give you more stuff, because we've only got 9 from memory, or is it a bit more than that now? And I think 14 or 15 Bayside has, and I think 27 Sydney Southern has, and something like 35 Canberra Bankstown. So we're still running on a shoestring.
So just through you, Mr. Chair, just on that program, is the department have allocated 3 consultants and 2 staff.
Oh, that's
to work
when
with
did they
us.
start?
They're already doing it.
Okay, so we'll see the repercussions over
That's
the
right.
next.
And then also, as indicated
Well,
in the report, we are also doing an improvement program looking at process improvements as well.
Thank you. Well, that's great.
Thanks, Councillor Katras. Councillor Amber Abraham, as a second, do you have any questions or
No,
comments?
thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion from other councillors?
could I just have say a quick thanks, because I noticed it was in the newspapers and we discussed it, and you're really hammering it, I guess, to get it fixed. So thank you for that.
Yes. Any further discussion?
Yeah,
Councillor Wayne.
yeah, I just want to say, yeah, congratulations, because I raised that question, and it's really, about the time it takes, and now it's in good progress. As I do look forward to a good report. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. I'll put the motion, and we might just go in the room for this.
Your vote, please, Mr. Chair.
For.
Councillor Borg.
For.
Councillor Amby Haberhart.
For.
Councillor Jamison.
For.
Councillor Catrus.
For.
Councillor Lansbury.
For.
Councillor Wang.
For.
7 votes for.
Thank you. I declare the motion carried, and there being no further business on the agenda, I declare the meeting closed at 8:59 p.m. Thanks, everybody.